Yeah, the call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home.
Hello, Wild Ones. Welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm so excited to have Edith Leoso here with me today. And she is from Wisconsin, and your official title, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Bad River Reservation, would you say? Or
Retired. I'm
retired? Okay.
retired. Yes.
What would you say? What would you call yourself now?
I'm just a retired elder from the tribe. That's
Very-
about it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked about 18 years as the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and that was under the National Park Service. So I was had federal officer status as well as tribal. And
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and
Nothing about it going into it.
so a lot of learning along the way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think because I was like a history buff. So I knew a lot about my tribe and different aspects of it. So I got the job.
So
And I
that
knew
helped a
about
lot.
grants.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew about grants and how to manage grants. So it was something else. But the work entailed looking at how federal agencies' actions, they like doing a permit or making a policy would affect tribes, especially my tribe in particular. And so my job was to actually look at everything they were doing. And there's a lot of federal agencies out there who are mandated to consult with the tribes under law. There's many laws out there right now that require tribal consultation before they can move forward with a lot of different things. So I was that person when it related to our culture, history, and that which was significant from a cultural level to the tribe, which when you think about that, there's a lot that's significant to tribes, at a cultural level that in creation. And so we looked at a lot of different things from cell towers to putting docks into the lake to the impact of wolves. So,
Yes.
yep. And so we had to, and this, since this was at a state level, they were to also consult with us, which never really happened. It was like a pseudo consultation, but not under the Historic Preservation Act. So they may have consulted with the state historic preservation officer, but not so much with the tribal historic preservation officers. And so we took action, and we were able to, within our own reservation boundaries, we're able to protect the wolves. And right now, Bad River, I believe, has 7 wolf packs that are within the exterior boundaries of the reservation in northern Wisconsin.
Wow. Yeah. How big is the reservation?
It's 145,654 acres within the exterior boundaries. So, and I always say within the exterior boundaries, that's how much land is within the boundaries. But it's a checkerboard land system. So it's not completely tribal land. However, tribal law covers the entire area. So if you live on private land within the exterior boundaries of the reservation, you're subject to tribal law as well as state law. And that's how we are too. living within the exterior boundaries of the reservation, we have to look at tribal law as well as state law.
Mhm.
So, and federal law.
Right.
So, so
Yeah.
I used to tell people there's so many laws out there that govern the actions of Native American people. You know, it's funny that we don't have one that says how many pieces of toilet paper we could use.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate, and why it is so important to have somebody like you, that obviously you're retired now, but the importance of that place of having a native person to consult uh the reservation, because there were so many things done, especially because for people listening, you're also a part of the Bad River documentary, and just watching that, how many things have been taken from you, and abused. So I think it's of vital importance to be able to make sure, to do the right thing going forward, that that doesn't happen, and you guys are taking care of the land, and to not take that away from you.
Yeah, I think that, we've been, saying stuff about the land since day one of European onset, right? And trying to help guide our European visitors in, right, and guests in. We're also, trying to, work with your European, their descendants. So
Right.
here we are today. Couple of my great great grandfathers signed the treaties, right? And I'm still, trying to help guide along, that which should be protected, which we looked at, from a nonsensical perspective, that, yeah, you should protect the water, you should protect these animals, because everything is linked together. You know,
Yeah.
those hurricanes down in the Gulf of Mexico uh, is,
Yeah.
is, you know, and I kind of look at the name change within the United States boundaries. I'm like, well, America is actually Mexican too.
Yeah,
So,
that I
but,
find is an unnecessary
yeah,
thing to focus on, but
yeah. But anyways, those hurricanes that are down there, they do affect us in northern Wisconsin, right? We
yeah.
we may not be hit with the winds right away, but a few days later we are, you know.
Mm.
But also, it isn't just us; it's those birds that are traveling. Those 200 and some species of birds coming from South America that and Central America that come to our reservation to do work in creation, that have done it since time immemorial, you know? So there are so many different things out there that we don't realize are very important to our life today, and if we don't have them, you know, last year we didn't have on my property on the reservation, my apple trees didn't produce any fruit. And that was the first time ever. And I moved here from Chicago with my parents at age 8, and I'm 64 years old now. And so within that time period, I've always seen apples on the trees. This past year, it didn't happen. Not one apple happened. And so I looked at that and thought, wow, this marks a significant moment in time of our history, right? Of the people living today and for those in the future. And there's been a lot of different significant things that have happened, and we have to look at, the wolf and what's happening to them, and how they are being treated, will we be treated the same way? So we almost see that, coming to fruition right now. Right now, a few, like a week ago, last week, we weren't considered United States citizens, and under the Snyder Act, yes, we are United States citizens. But, this new administration, that's not who we are. So what does that mean? Is the dehumanizing going to start? Just like how they're treating the wolf? That's what we look at, how significant, and we try to tell people the wolf is very significant in our environment. It has to maintain that balance there and be able to, take care of what is sick in our environment. And usually when you see a wolf pack, they're looking for those who are ill, sick, are not going to make it, and so they will take out that animal. We tagged wolves here on the Bad River Reservation, and we followed one right off reservation into a barn full of cows, and there was no predation that happened. And I said, well, that's good. That's probably because he had really healthy cows. There's nothing wrong with them. And it just walked all the way to the full length of the barn and walked right back out again. And that was it.
Wow. Yeah. And I also, you're not only in the Bad River film for people listening, but you're also in the People and Wolves Story of Coexistence from our friend Rachel Tilsa. So I just want to shout her out. Thank you so much for connecting us. But what I found particularly very fascinating, especially about the wolves, is your people's connection to them. And then when we first chatted, you rightly corrected me that saying that they are not myths, they are your stories from time continuum. They're for thousands of years, those are the stories passed down. And the story that you told in that film of the wolf brother, the Mayengan, did I pronounce that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Is, and how, because of your connection to the wolves, it shows up in your tribe, in your people. So if you wanted to, talk a little bit about your connection with them.
Yeah. And so we've always had a connection with the wolf. And it's in our creation stories, how Mayengan walked with Anishinaabe, and that first person lowered here, whose responsibility was to name all that there was to name. And when you think about that story, just that part of the story, it says that what that first person was to do was to observe everything in creation and give it a name. And usually, we look at something and say, oh, we're going to call this a cup, because this is part of a word from someplace that tells you it's a vessel that contains something, right? So it's the same concept, we look at and observe everything in creation and say, this is what this does. This is who this is. So as that first person walked through creation and was naming everything, he noticed that everything had a pair, that they came in pairs. There was, this, and asked the creator, where's my partner, and it was Mayengan that was sent. to walk with Anishinaabe, walk with the people. And that's what Anishinaabe is, first person lowered. It doesn't mean Ojibwe. It doesn't mean, anything like that. It was a first person lowered here. And so that person then had this being to walk with them. And that being is still walking with us today. How many people, can you point out who has a dog?
Right.
That's where that came from, So there we are, walking with that who protects us, who takes care of us, who will always be there for us, who will love us, who will be kind to us, if we are that way with them. And we have to, recognize that they're not too far removed from our fur babies, our pets there. So within our creation story, that's how it went. And it's still going today, We're still walking there. At one point, though, we had to part ways because of the change that was coming within creation. The difference between the animal world and the human world was becoming more distinct. And so at that point, we parted our ways, but in parting, we said, what will happen to you will happen to us. And what will happen to us will happen to you. It's there's a reciprocity there,
Right.
And so we always observed what was happening with Mayingan, and at one point it was almost completely wiped out in the United States, just like we were. People don't realize how many Native people were here at European onset. If they look out the door and they see how many people are here now, it is estimated that that's how many Native people were here at European onset.
Wow.
And just that first shake of the hand, started taking us out. And it is documented in Christopher Columbus's travels through the South there, that he came upon so many different villages that the entire population was wiped out. And what had happened was that the handshake happened, and that contamination happened, and so each tribe sent a runner to the next tribe. And when that runner got to that tribe, they were hugged and they were, fed and they were taken care of. But they also passed that contamination to that tribe. And then when he traveled then to that next tribe, he walked into an entire village that was nearly decimated. And he documented that as to why did this happen? And then the next one was all gone. It just was one village after another. They were just all died because of the contamination that came from first contact.
Yeah.
So that was, back in 1492. Here we are in 2025, and we're still, trying to survive, trying to make it through, and we're still observing Mayingan and what's happening to him. And we recognize that there's a particular thing that's happening today that's highly significant, and there's many different things in creation that's telling us this is a time of change. It's a very highly significant time of change. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to recognize that, and we need to actually think about who we are as human beings. And really decide And it's funny because our creation story has a lot of different things that are in there, right down from us moving from the East Coast to northern Wisconsin,
Wow.
because there were prophets that came to us and said there would be a light-skinned race that would come over the Great Salt Water,
Wow.
and this was before European onset, and that if we wanted to maintain who we were as Anishinaabe, that we needed to move to the West. And so we moved to the West, and parts of our who we are as Anishinaabe is, far west as Montana in the Rocky Boy Reservation. And we know that our story is still intact there as well as here. So there we have so many stories. We have also, so many prophecies of what might come to be, and one is that the light-skinned race would have to make a choice in order for this eighth fire to be lit. And they say, we are the children of the seventh fire. So what that choice is, was never said, but the choices that the light-skinned race has made since European onset, well, they don't have a good track record.
Right. Right. Very unfortunate. Yes.
So we
Yeah.
have been working with previous administrations, to let them know there's some changes that needed to be made. And
Yeah.
it up until the last administration, where they had mandated each federal agency to incorporate traditional knowledge into their federal agency. Whether that had moved forward or not, I don't know. But, we're just there trying to help, so that this place can move forward.
Because you guys are also, like you said, you are so connected to the land. It's embedded in your stories um and your people, like in the beginning of People and Wolves, how you described how the hunting of the Mayengan, especially the barbaric you know uh hunting of the female wolves that are pregnant
Mhm.
with babies, and how you've seen that affected in your people who also lost their children as well.
Mhm.
And that's just the recent connection that's happening. That's not including the full past history of what you guys have been through.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, when I really look at the Bad River film, we talk about all these different things that happen through time, right? And uh, there's a lot of in between things that had happened as well. And there's a lot of different things, with significant parts in history in general that we were able to do something, right? And
Right.
one of the things that is told in our stories is that whenever we are in need, whenever we need something to help us be able to live, um, whenever we are having a hard time or whatever, the Creator always provides something for us to be able to move forward. And and that includes, all the tools we have today, the pipes, the drums, even the lacrosse game, was gifted to us by the Creator, and people aren't aware of that, but that was to help us learn how to cope with PTSD, learn how to cope with differences, and be able to still live together as a people, right?
Right.
So there's there's a lot of us who are thinking, where is this taking us? Where are we going in life today? And a lot of us continue to look at Maingan, of what's happening there. But we recognize that there is a mirror to us as well that's there, and we need to acknowledge that. What are we going to do to preserve our humanity, right?
Yeah.
So, but yes, talking about it is one thing,
Right.
but we also have to move on that talk and
Yeah.
be able to take action.
Right. And one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating about wolves, and like you talked about, is they're so closely related to our furry dogs at home. And for people that think that they're so separated or so different is, it's just not true. And the fact that it makes sense in the story of your people that they are brethren to us, because I had another guest on, David Ian Howe, and his practice is ethnocenology, and he's an anthropologist that studies the history of dogs and wolves, and that they were our first partners is so accurate. And the similarities between our hunting styles, and our communionship in that, was why they're such a good partner for us. And to be able to highlight that, and then for people to then distance themselves, it's like, this important point that I feel like gets brought up with a lot of my guests, and how we value things, right? Why is it only that the wolf has a value only in their later ancestor as a dog, and not that their value in the environment and their niche is just as important as, just because maybe you don't find a specific value, why does it, why do you have to, as humans, have to put a value on something that has its own purpose in nature, that was gifted by Mother Nature to be able to, help the environment?
Right?
Yeah.
So true.
So true.
Yeah. Yep. So we're I think, and a lot of that we have to reflect on our own humanity and what it is, that we've done with ourselves, and to look at, how is it that we think right now, and how far removed have we become, since the Creator placed us here in the beginning. We're still identifying things in humanity, in creation. And I say creation because we're not just connected to the land. We're connected to everything in creation. It's the water, it's the air, it's, the insects, to the four-legged, to, the winged ones, all those that are crawl on the ground, those that slither on the ground, those that are in the water.
Yeah.
We are connected to all of them, and they all are trying to help us. They're all telling us something that we need to listen to. That what you call the wild, they were the first ones here. We were the last ones here. We're the bottom of the rung in creation. Every human person, and it is, that which is out in creation that is saying, hey, there's something happening here. Open your eyes. hello. You know, that's, that's
Yeah.
and 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 we have to, you know, be more mindful, more aware of our environment. You know, um, we hear a lot of stuff about climate change, which was global warming, which was, you know, contamination, which was, you know, pollution, which was all this kind of things, you know, different things that are out there. But it that didn't just happen in creation. You know, a lot of pollution came within our own minds. And we have to, you know, recognize that our 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 minds have changed. You know, we think differently about stuff, but should we? You know, um, right now we see a lot of natural disasters that are happening, but how do people cope with that without having our modern day amenities? You know, we still teach our children how to light a fire without any matches, you know, how to build a wigwam without, you know, a tarp, you know, and how to do that without even cutting the tree down, you know. So um, out in the woods, we still do that. We teach them how to use different parts of the plants and things like that on you know, to create rope, to be able to formulate things, how we still chip away at the stone to do different things, because we can't assume that the creator will allow us to have everything that we think that we need right now, right? uh,
Right.
should there ever come a time where we need to depend on creation, our children will know how to do that, you know. Um,
So
but will
important.
everybody's children know how to do that, you know? And we
Right.
see so many people fleeing from devastation, you know, because they don't know how to live in creation anymore. You know, they don't know where to go to be safe anymore in creation. So I know I'm babbling right now, but
No, I don't want to interrupt you because I really love your points, but I would just like to add too. I mean, I don't know how to start a fire without, you know, I mean, and that is hence my point of like the title of the podcast, Finding Your Wild, and to get back to that. One of the favorite things that I've seen online is like this illustration where it's like eco versus ego, and like the ego is the pyramid and the humans at the top and all the animals are on the bottom, and then eco is, there is no, you cannot tell, everyone's the same on that spectrum, you know. And like you were saying before, how connected we all are. You know, we are made up of mostly water. We have cells in our body that are from the cosmos. I mean, we are so intricately connected and made up of everything that is of all of creation, and like you were saying,
Mhm.
down to the little worms in the ground, to flying birds, to Mayangan, to wolves, every single thing we are connected to. There is a powerful and innate uh, connection that we have. And I also think that, you know, I was reading, you grew up or were, you know, forced to have Catholicism into your life as well. I grew up going to a Catholic school too, but you know, the thing that I find that, you know, some people in that realm sometimes say is, you know, the animals are, they were made for us, and I don't think that that's true. I think that that taking care of the environment, though, like if you don't see that as an innate spiritual act, like that's the thing that I think gets me sometimes, is taking care of the environment is, I can't imagine, no matter what you think is, you know, in the spirit world, how you wouldn't want, how that being wouldn't want you to take care of everything that is around you. That is such an innate thing, that I think that is really important that we need to get back to, that I know I'm sure you agree with too.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah, in our stories, the Creator put everything here for us to live a good life. There is nothing that we should not want,
Yeah.
and it's already here. But how are we taking care of those things? And and it reflects in our own bodies. Um,
Right.
right now, I think the statistics is 1 out of every 2 people will contract some form of cancer. Right. So to me, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, that's because they can't say 1 out of 1 person is going to contract some form of cancer because they'll be violating HIPAA then. You know, but you know, um, what is that from? You know, and it is, we are. Some people say we are what we eat. We are, what we are around in our environment, right?
Right.
And we have become polluted. We have become contaminated. And
Right.
so and it's only because we have done the contamination and the pollution. We have put that out there. So it is, recognizing that we don't really need a lot of things to be able to live a good life. We've just been conditioned to believe that we do, and we don't have to, you know, keep moving in that snowball, and
Right. Right. Yeah.
accumulating all these things, you know. So
Protect nature. Yeah.
yeah.
And a big thing, that Bad River obviously focuses on, not just the history of what happened to Native Americans in America, like that, but also your protection over water, and specifically Bad River, and that area, and how that goes into Lake Superior, and that's like the biggest freshwater area in the world, right? Or freshwater system in the world.
Hmm. Yes, yes, and um, yeah, and we're doing a huge battle right now to try and protect it. I mean, we've been battling so many different things. As a TIPO, I've seen so much stuff. I mean, the last thing I looked at before I left in 2022, the end of 2022, uh, was there was a projected that Elon Musk would be maybe creating a launch pad in the Upper Peninsula to launch rockets out into space from there. And I thought, oh my God, okay, is it because it's by water? Because that water freezes from time to time, and it has been known to completely freeze over. So yeah, if want to try that, yeah, go have at her then. But we'll tell you that that's just going to disrupt the whole area in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan if you do that. You know,
Yeah, like
and it's a
smack dab right in the
beautiful,
middle of the country. Like, yeah.
it's a Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a very beautiful, pristine area. Even though it went through and still is going through some mining, the that didn't contaminate it so much. It was bouncing back from that, but now without any environmental laws in place, or that they it might get tore up, but and that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that this is it, it's like slicing our own throat if we don't do anything, if we don't say
Exactly.
stop, right?
Yeah. Right.
So
Because, like like you were saying, the basic needs of us as humans, right? We don't need as much as we think we need. We need water and food and shelter. And I would say probably connection, to others. But I think that, like you said, that is like cutting our own throats, is because we need water, and the fact that it's not focused on being able to protect that vital resource to us as humans, like, is incredible. Hi, Wild Ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is brought to you by my clothing brand Femme Sauvage, and I'm going to link that in the description below, along with a little discount code for you. Be sure to check it out. We also donate $5 with each of our animal designs towards specific charities. I will also have those in the description below. And enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I love the when we first chatted, the awareness you were bringing to it, and what was it, the water walk, and you like
Yes.
walked the waters.
Yep. So that the water walks came from an awareness that happened actually with the journalist. He was Native American journalist. He was indigenous journalist. He's from Red Cliff tribe in just across the bay from us here in northern Wisconsin. His name was Walter Brzett. And as a journalist, he was looking at, it was post Voight decision, post walleye wars, and he had looked at how so many different things were happening around the lake, right? So his thought, his idea was that there should be a walk that is done. And so he organized a walk, and my brother led that walk. His name is Lawrence Stone. And I believe it was 1996 that happened. And it was to raise awareness of what was happening around Lake Superior. And they came across so much direct contamination going into the lake that, they raised the awareness. And so a lot of people started saying, they'd come up, what are you guys doing? We're walking to raise awareness about water and how important it is. And, they ended up picking up a person on the Canadian side. Her name was Josephine Mundaman, and she has passed away now. But she continued that walk, and she came to our lodge to gain sanction. And when I say our lodge, we still practice our traditional practices of Medewan Lodge, which is an ancient religion that came a long time ago. I say religion, it's an ancient way of life, actually, of recognizing, certain values. And part of it, the values and maintaining our stories from creation from time immemorial. So what Josephine did was she joined the walk on the Canadian side and walked all the way to Bad River, recognizing, that something needed to be done, and continued the walks then after that. And they're still going on today. And many of the women of our lodge have helped move those walks forward. And it has raised awareness on a global level, to the point that people really started looking at the water and how important that water was and what kind of being that water was. So many countries are able to, say this particular place we recognize it as a person, as having it's part of a being, you know, not a human person, but it is a being, human being. So it's not human, but it is a part of creation, a creation being. So
Right.
so they have acknowledged that, that particular being has rights, that just like us humans have rights, and they have acknowledged that, we can't violate their rights either, you know?
Right.
So because they are a part of creation, they are a being of creation, and that to violate their rights is to almost destroy our own rights. So that just walking for the water, carrying a copper vessel. So we lift the water in one location and we pray with it, and we walk in prayer. That's it. We cross every water body, creek, stream, river we cross. We acknowledge it with an offering of tobacco, which is one of our sacred gifts from the Creator, and we pray for that place. And since we've been doing that, we've seen on a global level how much awareness has been brought to water and how important it is, and we continue to do it. I did helped with a walk, who wanted to raise awareness of Lake Superior, because there was a permit issued for a mine, the tailings basin, that was less than less than a half mile away from Lake Superior,
Wow.
and is being built with the same standards of that they built those tailings basins back in the 1950s, which are now failing.
Right.
And a lot of different mining companies have expanded their tailings basins because they have gone over, they can see the existing tailing basins as failing and leaching into waterways. Part of the St. Louis River in northern Minnesota is called dead, because of so many releases that are into it, not only agricultural but mining releases, leaching into that river. And when they call a river a dead river, it means that it lacks the necessary components to actually support life.
Wow.
So we'll see within that river, unless they correct that, there will be no fish in that river, and there will be nothing that will, live in that river. So is that okay? Is that acceptable? Should that keep going on? That's the kind of things that we have to be mindful of, and look at in a different way. Yeah, we need steel, but how much steel has been produced already, and where are we with recycling that?
It's exactly. And what I found fascinating about your story too was that like you know steel pretty well. You were you went to school to be a welder,
An
or
iron
is that I
worker.
say that right?
I was an iron worker. I trained to be an iron worker to build high skyscrapers and bridges and, you know, everything like that. I never actually went to work as that, but I
Right.
learned how to do that work,
Yeah.
at the American Indian Iron Workers School in Chicago.
Yeah. So
And that
it's,
school is still going on too. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how our path, just talking with different people, how sometimes things align in our path that we need in order for our future true selves. So, like,
Hmm.
I'm sure to have all that knowledge is so
Yeah.
important for the work that you're doing, that you have done and that you continue to do as well.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
kind of know the backgrounds behind that.
Yeah, so in my work as a Chippewa, when they started talking about building bridges and creating the girders and the columns and things like that, I knew what they were talking about. But also, I knew what kind of products they might be using that might contaminate the water underneath that bridge. So
Right.
I had to ask them, don't use that. Don't, can you change this to this particular product, so that it doesn't contaminate the water. And that's
Right.
something that everybody can do, you know, when there is a public hearing for different things. Everybody can go and voice their opinion, but they should also be aware of what is done. You know, a lot of times the Army Corps of Engineers who permits actions, they hold the public hearing, but they don't release what it is they're having a hearing on, which might be a
Uh-huh.
500 to 1,000 page document saying, we're going to completely destroy this area and, replace this with that and everything like that. And in the process of doing that, oh yeah, we're probably going to be releasing. There's all these buzzwords. We might have a release into a waterway. In other words, they're going to contaminate a waterway. So, but
Yeah.
the when they post that, oh, you can find the proposal here, you know, not everybody has a computer, but also they don't have a computer that can upload that much information, from a
Right.
1,000 page document, and then they don't give adequate time to actually read that document for one person to read that document. There are people out there who are speed readers and can do that, but
Of course,
not
but like
everybody.
for the average person, which it actually is going to be affected. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it seems like it's funny because my friend that I was talking about before, David, he just released how to read a scientific paper, and in that there's a space where there's almost like a little synopsis of what that should be what's on these documents. So like there's a lay person or a lay thing to be able to at least get the gist of that. But I think it's almost forced complicatedness, right? Or they make
Mhm.
it complicated on purpose so that they get to be able to do what they want, because it's hard to be able to, like you said, have access to the document or be able to have time to read it. Most people are probably working and trying to, live their lives,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
um the importance of how that's going to then affect them gets
Yep.
overwashed because of their all of the pages that are attached.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it might take the average person, 100 hours to be able to read the whole document.
Right.
Also, if it that is that right there, what you just talked about is also something to comment on, that they're not following the law that says you have to do it in plain language.
Mm,
You have to present something in plain language in order for the average person to understand. And if
right.
you don't understand what's being written there, then you can comment on that and say, you need to rewrite this in plain language and you need to provide a synopsis. You need to do this and you need to have several different hearings to explain to us what's going on here because we
Right.
don't know. And that can
Yeah.
be everything that everybody says is entered into then and taken and is supposed to be taken into consideration,
Right.
serious consideration in the issuance of a permit, right? So you
Yes.
can say prior to the issuance of a permit, this is what you need to do. And so uh, a lot of people don't know that, but you know, that's how we can help get things
Yeah.
changed, right? Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
I
I'm
would
rambling.
also, oh, sorry.
I'm
um
rambling again.
No, it's so important. I'm glad that we're talking about it because I didn't know about that either. So that's what I love about this podcast and being able to chat with people like yourself is being able to learn these things and how people can effectively change that, hopefully in the future, to be able to be like, oh hey, this is going on, bring awareness to it, and this is like our the whole point of what is supposed to be America is that the we're supposed to be obviously contributing to everything together, and our voices are supposed to be able to mean something, to be able to be heard. And like you said, the importance of
Right.
water contaminants, right, is going to affect us all, whether you like it or not, or you like, I don't know who would support contaminating water unless it's the beneficial of one person as opposed to all people. The people that are looking
Mhm.
out for every one of us are like,
Mhm.
no, that's not a good idea. But the, couple of people that benefit are going to take that risk, and then they're going to do sneaky things like putting it into, I'm actually also a notary too. So sometimes, like when I'm reading documents, I'll be like legalese, so like that's kind of what it
Mhm.
is,
Yep.
legalese. Like it's hard for the common person to be able to distinguish what they're talking about and make it
Yes.
complicated on purpose. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Um. To
And then
yeah.
there's all
Sorry.
these little sneaky phrases that get put into a document like that. You know,
Right.
in the Bad River film, we talk about how we're being faced with this huge company who is doing stuff. Well, you know, people don't know, the details of that and how we're also battling it on the home front. You know, they are submitting proposals to the Army Corps, which cannot be, because it's directly on the reservation, it cannot be approved unless we approve it, right? The tribe approves it. And so we have to review the proposals. So I remember as a TIPO reviewing a proposal by this company, oil company or pipeline company, and seeing that one sentence in the middle of something totally irrelevant said, inside and the tribe agreeing to this particular proposal will waive their sovereign immunity to suit. You know,
Wow.
one sentence in a 500-page document that changed is a game changer. So the tribe and all of the when we receive a proposal, there's a huge department that it goes through, our natural resource department. And in that department, each of the staff there have to take their section, whether it's air quality, whether it's water resources, whether it's wetlands, whether it's historic preservation, and review each area that's there. And we have to look at how that look for those little bitty random sentences that are put in there that say, oh, by the way, if you agree with this, then yeah, you're waiving your sovereign immunity to suit.
It's crazy that that's allowed, that they're able to put it in such a way that's like hidden on purpose to try to be like, aha, like a I got you moment, right? Like, oh, you
Right,
missed that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, when we saw that, and several different uh, managers seen that in their section, it was like, what is this? This
Thank
has
goodness
nothing
they're
to
looking
do with
with a fine tooth comb and
right.
recognize that they have to do that. But it's
Yeah,
unfortunate that it has to be that way. But you know,
yeah,
to be able to catch that and be like, no.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah. So there's a lot that's happening. Right down to divide and conquer, right down to um, creating a caste system within our own um, reservation. It's um, we we look at things differently. And, in the movie, people acknowledge that there was tribal members who work for that company, right? And that other tribal members said, yeah, get a job. That, it's if that job is available to you, that's good for you. You're able to provide for your family. We're not going to, dehumanize our own people because they need to feed their children and help their family. So, and they need money to do that, right? So that they're not out on the street actually having to build a wigwam,
Of course. Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
but their ideology is, we'll pit them against each other. Well, I don't want to be pitted against anybody within my tribe. I love all my tribal members all the tribal members in my tribe. I love my tribe. And that's not going to change. I love everything that we did not cede to the United States, and that's our whole with everything within the exterior boundaries of the reservation. We did not cede that over like we ceded other territories. We had land cessations for other territories, but not the land that was within the exterior boundaries of our reservation. That is still our land, not United States land. It's held in trust. It's held in trust with the United States as long as they maintain their agreement with us, which is the treaties that created that. Yeah. And it's like that. And if they don't want to maintain that agreement, that opens the doorway for us to go to somebody else who can look after our interests. And that's written right in the treaties. And if people look at, you mentioned how it's American for the people to say something. That's the preamble of the United States Constitution. We, the people, right? It's the same way within our Constitution. What people don't realize that we have our own Constitution at Bad River because we are a separate nation, and we have our own laws and we have, our own way of doing things. But a lot of people have not read their own, United States Constitution and have seen all the different parts that are specific to Native American people, to the indigenous people, what they call the Indians in the Constitution. That they're referring to the indigenous people who are here. And there's several spots in there that says, we're going to do this except for the indigenous people. They don't have to do that. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a whole segment in the law libraries for federal Indian law, which are laws specific to our people. And it's, if not equal to tax law, it might be more than tax law. So if you see the section of tax law in a library, ours is way bigger than that. There's a lot more laws that were created specific to Native people, indigenous people from this land. So, and we're protected under those laws, in certain ways, but we're also oppressed under some of those laws as well. So, and we continue to be oppressed. So, but at the same time, we know when in the context of all of creation, all of us are on the bottom rung.
Exactly.
All of
Exactly.
humanity is on the bottom rung of that.
Yes.
And when it comes down to it, the rest of creation will know how to care for themselves, will know how to be able to take care of themselves and be able to adapt. However, humanity, however, might have some issues there. So we need to be more
Yeah.
mindful of how important the rest of creation is to us.
Yeah. And I think that, coming to a place where hopefully in the future that we can respect each other and respect the land as another being, and really taking into account how important and how one we are with nature and everything in creation. I think it's, no matter what spiritual background you come from, uh just being able to, I mean, there's so many in so many different religions, or, stories and tales. There's so many different connections to
Mhm.
nature and animals. That's where most of especially the early on, starts. I was talking to someone that focuses on making tea the other day in India, and he's working to with directly with farmers that don't use any chemicals or anything like that, and talking
Mhm.
about actually how the label of organic is just um uh, a marketing ploy. And
Mhm.
the charge for having that certification is very expensive, that a lot of these farmers can't even, and it doesn't mean what you think it means. So, and then he was also talking about how, in Indian mythology, how, Shiva also is connected with the snake, and Ganesha with the elephant. There's all of these interconnected, woven, tales with nature, and that's just one of many examples of how we are connected. And I think that also science also shows how connected we are, right? Like, even with, again, what I said before, we're made up of mostly water. We're made of different, you know things from the cosmos. Like, we are all connected, and I think that, that's really what we're put here for, is to find that connection with each other, and to, make that as best as possible, and to not only take care of ourselves, take care of each other, take care of the environment, the planet, is so important.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Before I have you go, I would love to hear maybe a little bit more about so it's so you're a fourth degree Midawinwin woman. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Midday win.
Okay.
Midday win.
And that is and
That
that's
that's
what you
that is an
yeah.
ancient way of life that we continue to practice today.
Yeah.
Some people say religion, but it isn't a religion. It's just the way of life, and if people thought of religions as a way of life, they might be treating people differently, right?
Right.
Thinking of people differently. Um, so our Medewan religion or way of life is still is being practiced today, where we respect all of creation, you know, where we are trying to be truthful and honest. When we speak to the creator, we know the creator is listening to us, and when we ask for something of the creator, we need to be mindful of how we ask for that, how that comes to us. I always use my friend who put her tobacco out, and when you're talking about organics and that, we
Yeah.
actually have a tribe out in the East Coast, the Narragansett tribe, who has made tobacco for us
Mm.
there that has no chemicals in it. And you can't find that anywhere in any
Ah,
tobacco shop. anywhere else. It's a lot of the commercial tobacco is loaded with chemicals. So because it's one of our sacred plants that was gifted to us by the Creator, one of four, we continue to use that, and that's the offering that we give to the spirits, and to acknowledge them and the great spirit, and in doing that, we ask for whatever it is that we're going to ask for. So a lot of times when we have ceremony, the women who are visiting their grandmother or on their menstrual cycle, we ask them to sit back, because not that because they're in some bad way or anything, but because they are already in ceremony, and their body is sacred in that way. And so we ask them to sit back in their own ceremony that they're having, and not to do anything else but stay in that sacred space that they're in. They're looked at as being a very sacred being at that time. And so, but because if you're sitting back, you can't do anything at ceremony. So one of my friends who offered her tobacco, she said, and I don't want my grandmother to come visit me during ceremonies. So if you cannot let that happen, then, I'd be really happy for that. And so she said, yeah. And the spirit listened to me, and I didn't have my moon time. She said, instead, yeah, she said, I didn't have my moon time for 9 months.
Talk about having to be careful what you ask for.
Be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you pray for. It will come to you, in asking for that. And whoever it is that you pray for, what we acknowledge in our Medewan way of life is that, there is one creator, one great spirit, of the greatest of all of them. And that spirit has so many different helpers throughout the spirit world, and we try and acknowledge as many as we know now. And so in doing that, we are careful of what we ask for from the Creator, so that, because it's very literal.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so we always need to be mindful of that. And we still maintain, the use of those sacred medicines that were gifted to us, in our time of need of humanity here on Turtle Island. And that's what the Americas were called. Before they were called the Americas, they were called Turtle Island. And there's a whole nother story associated to that. If anybody's interested in those types of stories too, they can look at the Mishomis book, written by Edward Benton Benet, who is my teacher, one of my teachers. My grandma was another teacher of mine. And there are many elders who are no longer here, who are my teachers.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I was going to definitely pick that book up. I'm always fascinated to learn more, especially about connection and stories. I always find it very fascinating. Yeah.
And that book has the story of Mayingan in it.
Yeah.
Walking with Mayingan.
Thank you so much. I feel like this is a perfect place to end. I'll link that book below too for people that want to connect with that and read it. For people that want to connect with you, learn more about you, where can they find you?
Probably they can Facebook Messenger me, I guess. That's where I'm at right now. I do have an email that gets overloaded right now, because yeah, I was in the Bad River movie, but I was also in People and Wolves, and I was
Yeah.
also in there's another movie that's coming out, The Sacred Wisdom, Sacred Earth, which we'll be doing a pre-screening. It's like 60% done.
Wow.
But I was in all three of those movies, plus a documentary that we show right here at Bad River in our museum. Uh, and I did all four of those at the same time. So
Oh wow.
there's a lot of different things that are happening. Plus, I've published a couple of papers too with as a co-author. And most recently, one of my papers that I published as a co-author with Jessica Conaway from UW-Madison Nelson Institute was selected to we will be presenting at the Water History of the United States in
Wow.
Middelburg, Netherlands in May. And so that is going to be really interesting because it's the conference itself in the Netherlands is focused on a water history of the United States.
Very
So
interesting. Yeah.
so
Wow.
it's going to be and they were looking for those people who were walking with the water. So I get to go.
It's cool to see how far, and it's such a simple but powerful act of that walking with the water, and how, like you said, it's affected people worldwide, which is incredible, and much needed, I would say.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. And so and my email leosoedith@gmail.com is there if people want to get a hold of me. I don't know how many people are on your podcast or
yeah. It's growing.
so
It's growing every week, so you never know.
nice.
um, yeah, but I so enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I could talk to you forever, actually. But I am so happy that you were able to make the time to come on, and I really appreciate it and learned so much from you. And I hope that people listening learned as well. And even if they could take a little something away from that and learn how to help their neighborhood where they are and their waterways, that
Right.
would be wonderful.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, a lot
so
of people
yes,
don't know that they don't test their water, their ponds
yeah,
and their streams and things like that, and that they can ask for that to be done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And just working from what's around you is a great place to start if you want to make a change. So yeah.
Yep.
Um, thank you so much, Edith, and thank you so much, Wild Ones, for listening. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you,
Bye.
Brianna, for having me. See ya.
Thank you.
Revel in the moment like a river flowing to the sea. I feel the energy of life force flowing all through me, and I'll allow it all to dance with my body and play. And no one could ever convince me to give my power